The history of my family began in Wales, when my grandparents were both born. Relating back to my grandfather, he was born and bred in Wales, and as a young fellow, he's only 12 years of age, was working in a colliery. And after working several years in that, and growing up and then getting married, he thought the best thing he could do would be to migrate to Australia and try and get a job in Australia. In 1884 they decided to immigrate to Australia, and they arrived in Rockhampton before travelling down to Gympie to work in the mines. So he came out and got a job as a winder driver at one of the big mines in Gympie. When the family moved to Gympie, they settled into a house at Nelson Road, not far from the fire station. That house was burnt down, and then they moved on to a place at Stanley Street. From that point, Dad attended school at the 1 Mile Primary School till the class of Year 6. At that point, he went to work for a fellow by the name of Billy Neiman, who was a cabinet maker funeral director, and he did an apprenticeship, started doing an apprenticeship there. Didn't stay there very long before he went to the mining office as a clerk. While he was at the mining office, he decided to join the Army Cadets. They were part of the 47th Battalion Wide Bay Unit, Wide Bay Regiment. After he joined the 9th Battalion, they trained in Brisbane for some time before they were shipped off to Albany and then over to Egypt. From Egypt, then they moved to Malta and a couple of islands in the Mediterranean before the Gallipoli campaign. On the 25th of April, the Anzac landing took place, and Dad's unit some of his units were some of the first on the beach. It was later on that day that he was wounded in the left arm, and before he could go to hospital they spent some time either on the beach or on the decks of cargo vessels. From Anzac Cove, he was taken by ship eventually to a hospital, an army hospital at Alexandria in Egypt, where he had an operation to save his arm. And after that, after he recovered in Alexandria for some time, he was shipped back to Australia. I should point out that by the time Dad reached the hospital in Alexandria, he had gangrene in his arm, and he was advised by nurses that when he woke up he mightn't have an arm after the operation. Fortunately, he had an Indian doctor who had experience with gangrene, and when he came out of his operation he still had his arm and carried on for the rest of his life with it. He was transported back to Australia once he'd recovered from his wounds in Egypt, and they arrived in Sydney on the 6th of August 1915. The doctors told him that he was unfit for service and he had to be medically discharged. He wasn't very happy about it, but that was the way it was. But after 6 months or so in Brisbane, he decided he wanted to go back to his unit. Now, when he wanted to go back to his unit, they said, no, you can't go. And it was because he wasn't fit. He had one arm a bit shorter than the other. In the end, after a lot of pestering to the department, they said, well, if you're prepared to sign a disclaimer, we'll let you go. But then at a later date, when he needed the pensions and that additional pension, that was denied because of the fact that he'd signed his disclaimer. Very dissatisfied. So in the end, he went back to France as a captain with the 41st Battalion. It was a new battalion formed in Brisbane at that time. When he was in there, he spent a lot of time on the front, but a lot of time he was backwards and forwards to England. He was a training officer and even did lecturing and training in Britain and England. While we were kids, Dad just often relate stories that for things that happened to him while he was in France. One of those instances was when he was at a forward command post below a bunker or alongside a trench. In the middle of winter, there was ice everywhere, and there was 12 officers in this room, in this shelter, having a conference. Next thing, this whiz bang, a German shell came straight into the shelter and blew up. 10 people were killed, and he was one of the 2 that survived. The only injuries my dad received in that occasion was from flying ice, which cut him round badly, and that necessitated him being taken to England for treatment. On another occasion, in France, in the middle of the night, well, at that particular time, it was pitch black, and Dad was zigzagging around the shell craters to get to his position where he wanted to be, and that's when he had his accident. And you can imagine what it would be like with all the potholes around. And he was going out to inspect this outpost. He was challenged by the sentry to give a password, which he did. The sentry then said, "Over here, skipper." Dad walked forward, looked straight into the trench where there was a sentry standing below with a rifle and bayonet, and he landed up with the bayonet up through his groin. That put him right out of action, and it was another trip to England for repairs. While Dad was recuperating from his wounds in Brisbane, he spent some time in and out of hospital in Brisbane. They used to be visited regularly by the Red Cross Association. It turns out my mother was a member of that association, and that's where Mum and Dad met. And they used to go with on family picnics and family sailing days and that type of thing. That's how they got close together. They became engaged and then later married. Yeah, good. After the war, Dad decided he would have a crack at the local government. So in 1924, he nominated for the position of mayor of the city. The other nominee was his own brother. When the election came about, Dad won the election and he was appointed mayor until 1927. for the next 3 years, that was. Dad was an inaugural member of the RSL. It went to the meeting in Brisbane when the Queensland branch was formed. And so as a result, he's a very strong RSL person. Associated with the RSL was Legacy, and Dad was also running the Legacy section in the Gympie branch. So he had a lot of affinity with the widows and kids of past soldiers. And as a fellow working in the office in Mary Street, we used to get people coming in actually thanking him openly, like, for what he was doing for them, with his kids' schooling and travel and all that type of thing. So he was heavily involved with that type of thing in his life. And at that particular time, he was still working as an area officer with the Army, just for a short period. Then he tried to go into business with his brother in real estate. That didn't work out real good, so he decided he'd start his own real estate business. That was real estate valuing and insurance and all that type of thing. Yeah, while he's in his own business as real estate officer, the war started with Germany in 1939, and Dad was called back to the drill hall again as an area officer again, and then later on as a manpower officer. So in that role, he more or less decided whether people should go to the war, whether they should not go to the war, depending on the circumstances. Yeah, it was just, for instance, a woman on a farm where older boys had gone to war, and there's only one left from a dairy farm, and he would have been needed on the farm, even though he wanted to go away. He wouldn't let him go. That type of thing. After being a manpower officer, it was the time when the war got into top gear and Japan came into the picture, and the VDC was formed, Volunteer Defence Corps, and he was CO for an area from Noosa Heads, or from Killam to Inskip Point and Fairway Inland, and where they had lookout posts at Inskip Point, Double Island Point, Kingsborough and Noosa. People working at these outposts on the coast would check on Allied shipping and aircraft, and also the possibilities of the Japanese shipping and aircraft. So they did that for most of that period, including walking from Inskip to Noosa, checking out on land areas behind the dunes where people could hide or do things. So it was a fairly big job. I did go with him on a trip one time to one of his posts, outlook posts at Double Island Point, and took the supply of food, additional trips to replace the other ones, carrier pigeons to relay the messages back to the drill hall. And these fellas would have been on the lookout for about a week or a fortnight at a time, and then be relieved. So that was life during the war, at that part of the war. And Dad was also trying to run his business at the same time. So he was a busy boy. Our home life in Barter Street, well, in those days it was we were pretty strictly controlled as kids, but on the other hand, we had a good life, and Dad provided for us very well. He would never see us without anything. And he and Mum were very good together that way. They used to enjoy their nights as playing, especially playing bridge. There's a group of families played bridge, and once every 4 weeks or so they'd be at our place. And Anzac Day, Dad was the march marshal. He led the parade for many, many years. Always dressed up in his wartime uniform. Of a morning of Anzac, we'd be polishing shoes and buckles and brass and everything to get him and his spurs that he used to wear. That was all done on morning of Anzac Day. So Dad had a very strong, as I said, very strong affinity with the RSL, with the army, and he used to pride himself in leading those marches. So every Anzac Day, Dad just attend the dawn service. He had to be there, and we did go on a couple of occasions with him. I don't know whether I mentioned before, but I was working at Ipswich at the time, and Dad was running the business. In the end, my mother died in 1960, and I came home following that. Dad asked me to come back and run the office, which I did, but Dad never gave it away. He still came down to the shop every day and met some of his friends and went over to the Tats Hotel and had a beer with them. And then this one day he came back from the pub with his mate and asked my sister to drive him to the hospital because the doctor wanted him to go to the hospital to have an extra checkup. And that checkup proved fatal. He found he had lung cancer, and he lasted 2 weeks after the admittance. Getting back to Dad's funeral, at the church, his coffin was draped with an Australian flag with his medals laid out on top. And when we went out to when we arrived at the cemetery, he was afforded a 21-gun salute, and a last post was played, and all the army rituals were carried out.
A chapter ends. To the late George Thomas. A chapter ends for one destined to be a well-known figure in our history. Remarkable, his memory served him well, and how our streets were named, privileged to tell. So prominent on every Anzac Day, stalwart and straight, as soldier all the way. Endearing to so many through the years, his passing leaves his memory veiled with tears. Once Mayor of Gympie, and always deep down, he held respect and interest in our town. A chapter ends, yet time will always tell the good deeds of this man who served life well.